Welcome to Christian Chapel Online. We're thrilled that you are joining us today. My name is Chris. I'm the lead pastor at Christian Chapel in Tulsa, Oklahoma. If you're joining us in the Tulsa area, we would love for you to join us in person. We believe that every individual is created for a relationship with Jesus and relationships with other believers, and those are best experienced in person. If you're joining us from outside of our area, we would encourage you to find a local community of believers where you live so you can find the same deep and meaningful experiences of relationships in the context of a faith community. Thanks again for joining us today. We pray that the worship service you're about to experience encourages you to continue to move forward in your relationship with Jesus. Today we're continuing our series that we've called Take It to Jesus. We're exploring different stories in the Gospels where people bring their problems, their questions, their doubts, their fears, their sickness, their worries and anxieties, all of it they just bring to Jesus. And he sometimes answers in expected ways, and sometimes he answers in unexpected ways. This morning we're going to look at a story that is told in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and talk about what it looks like to take your resources to Jesus. And specifically, when you are facing a problem that's beyond your ability to meet, when you're facing an opportunity or God gives you a vision that is too big for you to accomplish on your own, what do you do? And what we'll see in this story is what we do is we just bring whatever God has put in our hands, and we say, Jesus, I don't know what you might do, but I'm excited to see it, and I can't wait to participate in it. And so, like I said, this story is told in all four Gospels. It seems to be one of the disciples' favorite stories because they all include it in their Gospel accounts. This morning, we're going to look at John chapter 6. John tells us kind of a more robust telling of this story. John chapter 6, verses 1 through 13. If you have your Bible with me, you can follow along. It says, sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee. That is the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Another one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. This passage teaches us a lot about following Jesus. I think one of the first things it teaches us is tests are always part of following Jesus, which is both good news and bad news. It's bad news because the tests that Jesus gives us are designed to teach us to depend on him, not on ourselves. And so in the Old Testament, you see God testing his people over and over and over again, and every test is intended to teach them something about God and something about themselves. When Jesus tests the disciples, it is almost always to teach them, instead of looking to themselves, he wants them to look to him. And so if we're going to be followers of Christ, we have to come to an understanding this morning of I'm going to be tested. And tests are not a sign that I'm living outside of God's favor or blessing. Tests are not proof of God's absence, but often tests are the circumstances that God himself has led me into so that I can learn more about him and more about how I can rely on him. And so a test is not something that we necessarily need to shy away from, try to avoid. We are not intended to live all of our life by our own power and providing for ourselves through our own resources. But if we're following Jesus, he will use both opportunities and obstacles to teach us that in ourselves we are not enough. But when we take what he's given us and offer it back to him, he can multiply it in an abundance to teach us incredible lessons. And so we see as this story begins that tests are not just part of following Jesus, but tests are something that Jesus uses to teach us. So that the crowd has come to him, and Jesus sees this as a moment where he already knows exactly what he's going to do. And so he turns to the disciples and says, all these people are here. How are we going to feed them? We can't send them back home. They may faint as they go home along the way. We can't turn them away. There's nowhere out here where there's just an abundance of bread. What are we going to do? And John tells us when he asked this question, he already had in mind what he was going to do. So it's a good reminder for us when Jesus leads you into a season of testing, he already has the answers. He already knows exactly what he's going to do, how he's going to do it, and when he's going to do it. He's just going to let you kind of figure out along the way, where do I reach that point of surrender? Where do I reach that point of sacrifice? And when I get there, he's going to provide in an incredible and powerful way. And so when Jesus turns to the disciples and says, what do we do? It's not at all because he needs their advice. Although I think many of us, we sometimes respond like the disciples of, well, Jesus, I'm so glad you asked because I have some suggestions for you. How do I bring peace into the world? Jesus, let me tell you, I've studied this. Right? What would improve my marriage? Well, Jesus, let me tell you some things about my spouse that I think you could fix. How do I become a better parent? Make these kids not so bratty, Lord. If you would just make them rise up and call me blessed. And we just kind of got some ideas that we could give to him and suggest, and it would make everything just a little bit better for us. But again, what we want to understand is Jesus tests us to teach us, which means part of the test is learning Jesus has the answers, not me. And so the default response of the disciple when Jesus turns to us and says, what do you think we should do, is not to think, he's finally asking for my advice. But the default response is to say, you alone know, Lord. What should we do? And so as we kind of work through this story, what we see is Jesus in this moment gives the disciples this test not to cause them to fail, but he gives them this test to strengthen their faith. The goal of the test is that they will have a tested faith, which is a trusted faith. The goal of every test that Jesus gives you in your life as well is to lead you into a deeper experience of his love, his grace, his mercy, his power, his provision. It's to help you understand in greater and deeper, more meaningful ways who he is and what he's accomplished. It's to help you take the truth of Scripture and move it from words on a page to the foundation of your life. It's to take the testimonies of other believers and no longer just rely on their stories, but to begin to form your own stories of how God was gracious and how God was kind and how God restored and how God provided and how God healed and how God did so much more than you ever would have thought was possible. Every test that God gives to us is a space where he is going to strengthen us through the power and the work of his Spirit. And part of the way that our faith is strengthened is by it kind of reveals how we think and also begins to change the way we think. So Jesus comes to the disciples and he says, what should we do? And their answers reveal how they think. Now, Philip is the first to pipe up, and Philip responds like an accountant, like an engineer, like a business owner. Philip hears the question of Jesus and thinks, I'm the straight A student. I have the answer. Right? And so Philip says, Jesus, listen, even if we could, it would take more than a year's wages to provide food for all of these people. Right? What Philip is saying is, well, so there is a way, Lord, that we could do it, but the way is impossible. And so when we're faced with challenges, when we're faced with problems, when we're faced with new opportunities, when God gives us a big vision, for some of us, our default response is, how do I fix this? How do I take care of this? How do I maybe kind of plan for it and prepare for it? And sometimes we come to the point where Philip comes to us saying, well, this one's actually impossible. I can't do this. I can't, and you've been there in your own life of, I can't heal the sickness. I can't fix the relationship. I can't undo the larger economic forces that are at work that have destroyed my business. I can't undo the cycles of abuse and addiction and other things that have existed in my family and continue to wreak havoc on those that I love. I can't do that, any of those things. And we come back to Jesus and we just say, Lord, basically this is impossible. And yet Philip's response reminds us that when Jesus asks us a question, He's not asking us to answer him from the position of a business owner, from the position of an accountant, from the position of an engineer, from the position of a problem solver. He's asking us to answer the question from the position of a disciple. And a disciple's answer to Jesus when he says, "What should we do?" is to turn to him and say, "Lord, you alone know." And so then we're just going to submit to him. So it reveals how we think, and for Philip it reveals he thinks primarily in terms of what can I do. And then you have Andrew, one of the other disciples, and he's showing us that tests sometimes teach us how to think differently. Now, Andrew, when he hears the question and he hears Philip's response and Jesus kind of just, shoots him down, or we don't know if he even really acknowledges him, but Andrew kind of pipes up. Andrew is Peter's brother. If you know the Gospels, you know that Peter is always the disciple to speak first. He's always the disciple who has the answer for everything, right? And so the fact that Andrew kind of one-upped his brother, it seems to be a mini miracle in itself in this story. But Andrew, he has heard Jesus' question, and instead of analyzing, Andrew begins to look around. And he finds a boy who has a lunch that he's packed and brought with him. And there's 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. And so he brings them to Jesus and he says, "Here you go, Lord, but how far can so little go among so many?" Now, the tone of a question is often just as important as the actual question itself. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they don't tell us the tone with which Andrew asks his question. So you can hear it in 2 ways, right? You can hear Andrew's question as kind of the Debbie Downer, the Eeyore type question of, "Well, Jesus, we found 5 loaves and 2 fish, but how far can so little go among so many?" Or you can hear Andrew's question as a disciple who's found something, and he's taking it to the one that he knows can do everything. And you can hear Andrew asking the question with a little sparkle in his eye, with a smile on his face, and he grabs this kid and says, "Hey, buddy, you want to see something awesome? Come here." And he comes up to Jesus and he says, "Lord, I found 5 loaves and 2 fish. But Jesus, how far can so little go among so many?" Right, Jesus? And you can almost feel him giving him the wink as he's asking the question. No, we don't know how he asks it. But that same question can be a statement of doubt or a statement of faith. And what it reminds us of is when we come to Jesus with facing the problems, challenges, opportunities, vision that he's given to us, we always have something in our hands. And when we come, we can ask the same question as a statement of doubt or a statement of faith. Of, "Lord, this seems impossible, but what could you do with what you've put in my hands?" And when we begin to ask it with that position of faith, what we find is the test actually begins to create the opportunity. And so they bring this boy to Jesus. And just think for a moment, what is it like to be that kid? So we can kind of infer a couple things about him. One, he seems like he's kind of a naturally curious child because there's a crowd of people and he's there right in the middle of it. Right? So he was the little ADD kid riding his bike around the neighborhood, the one who his mom said, like, "I don't care what you do, just go outside. Right? I'll see you at dinner." We also know he's either a responsible kid or more likely he has responsible parents. Because before they sent him out for the day, they packed a lunch for him. Is that like, "Kid, you're driving me nuts. Get out of here, but take the bread and fish. Take it with you." And then it seems, too, as if he's somewhat maybe persistent or determined because he's worked his way to the inner circle of the crowd of thousands. It seems as if when Jesus asks the question, Andrew doesn't have to go wading through the crowd to find someone. It seems like Andrew just kind of turns around of, "Hey, here's a boy with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And so this kid has kind of worked his way in. Now, the crowd is there because they've heard the stories of Jesus. The crowd is there because they've heard the teaching of Jesus. The crowd is there because they want to see something awesome. They want to see the sick healed. They want to hear one who teaches with an authority that none of their teachers of the law have. They want to be astounded by his wisdom. And in the middle of that is this eager little kid with his 5 loaves and 2 fish. And all of a sudden, he moves from an observer to a participant. Because Andrew just goes and says, hey, come with me. And so it reminds us that in seasons of testing, God is creating opportunities, not just for us, but also for others, to experience his provision, to stand in his presence, to hear his name. I mean, can you imagine what this day does for that kid? For the rest of his life, this is the first story he tells everyone, all of the time. As he grows up and becomes a young man and goes to his future father-in-law to seek the hand of his wife in marriage, maybe his father-in-law asks him, well, son, how are you going to provide for my daughter? And he says, funny story about provision. When I was a kid, I had 5 loaves and 2 fish. And then maybe he gets married and he has kids of his own one day and they're growing up and maybe they go through a tight financial season and one of his kids says, Dad, are we okay? And he's like, hey, not only are we okay, did I ever tell you about my 5 loaves and 2 fish? And the kid responds with, yes, 1,000 times. That's the only story you ever tell, Dad. You tell it everywhere we go and everything we do. As Jesus' ministry expands, we don't know, does he go to Jerusalem? Does he witness a crucifixion? Does he witness a resurrection? Is he part of the early church? There's so much we don't know. But what we know is this day marked him. This day was a core memory in his life of, I just brought what I had to Jesus. And something amazing happened. And so for us in seasons of testing, when we're bringing what we have to the Lord or where we're encouraging others to take what they have to Jesus, we're not doing it from a position of fear. We're doing it from a position of faith. Because we believe tests not only strengthen our faith, but tests reveal the power of Jesus. The main character in this story is Jesus Christ. It's not Philip, and it's not Andrew, and it's not the boy, and it's not the loaves and the fish, and it's not the crowd of 5,000. It's the Son of God who's come to take away the sins of the world. It's the Word that was with God in the beginning who's put on flesh and made his dwelling among us. It's the one who is unlike anyone we've ever seen before, and he's orchestrated this whole event, drawn this massive crowd in the middle of nowhere to teach them that he is powerful in a way that they have never seen or witnessed before. And so for us in seasons of testing, we go to Jesus with confidence that he is powerful enough. When we started this series, we talked about, hey, when we take it all, who are we taking it to? We're not just taking it to another teacher, another prophet, another religious leader. We take everything to the eternal Son of God. And when we come to him, he already has the answers. He already has the plan. And he's going to work it as we submit and surrender to him. And so the boy comes with Andrew, and Jesus takes his loaves and fish, and then it says Jesus tells everyone to sit down. He gives thanks, and he starts to pass it out. And we see that Jesus, when he provides, when he answers, when we offer him what we have, Jesus multiplies our resources. And so on that day, it says 5,000 men. So there would have been women, there would have been children, teenagers in the crowd as well that day. So, I mean, this is a crowd of several thousand more than the 5,000. And Jesus tells them, all right, just have everybody sit down. And he still just has 5 loaves and 2 fish when he's telling them to sit down. And then he gives thanks, and he still just has 5 loaves and 2 fish when he gives thanks. And the disciples are probably thinking the same thing that you and I are thinking of, this is going to be a great meal for 7 people. But we're going to be 4,993 pieces short, plus women and children. And yet, what Jesus does is he begins to show us that kingdom math is different than our math. Where we see 5 plus 2 equals 7, the Gospels are teaching us 5 plus 2 times Jesus equals 5,000 plus. And it's again meant to reorient the way we think. And so Jesus begins to pass it out. The other Gospels say that the disciples help him in the distribution process. This would not have been a short or fast process to serve a meal to thousands of people. The first 7 people that received their food, there is no miracle. That's just what the boy had brought. But number 8, 9, 10, through 5,000 plus. And so what we actually have happening here is not just one big miracle, but it's one big miracle made up of 1,000 smaller miracles that each person interacts with at a personal level. Every person who's in the crowd that day now becomes a witness of, I didn't just watch him do it, I participated in it. And so it's a reminder to us, even when God provides, my faith is not simply built on what God has done for you, but he intends for me to experience it myself as well. That you will know his miracle working power and I will know his miracle working power. And as we begin to surrender whatever we have in our hands to him, he multiplies it in an abundance. He doesn't do just a little bit. And so John keeps telling us a story. It says that everyone receives food, but they don't just receive a serving. It says they eat until they are full. And then he tells us there were 5,000 men. So I don't know if you catch the significance of that. If you're a man, you know what that is. If you're married to a man, you know what that is. If you've raised a man, you know what that is. If you've ever ate dinner with a man, you know what that is. Right? And so what that says is there were seconds and there were thirds, and for some of them there were fourths, and for some, there were some 18-year-olds in the crowd that day. Do you know what it's like to feed an 18-year-old? Do you know what it's like to feed multiple 18-year-olds? Can anyone identify with Angie and I struggle? Anyone have a grocery bill that outpaces your mortgage? Yeah, you think I'm exaggerating. Not at all. Some of you know you've been there. We got an 18-year-old who he loves going to Texas Roadhouse. Do you know what the best part of Texas Roadhouse is? The rolls. There you go. Absolutely. So when we go, they bring the rolls out ahead of time. And we know there's maybe a dozen in the thing. And so if there are 4 of us, we know that me, Angie, and Audrey, we get to split the first 6 rolls. And Corbin eats the other 6. And then they bring out his dinner, and he eats the steak, and he eats the sides, and he'll generally eat another 3 or 4 rolls with his dinner. And then they come out, and they ask if we want dessert, and we always decline, because Dave Ramsey says to. And then they say, is there anything else we can get you? And Corbin says, more rolls, please. And they bring out another 3 or 4, and there's anything else. He says, more rolls, please. And he'll eat another, 6 to 8 rolls for dessert. And so by the time we're done, he's at a full steak dinner with all the sides and all the things, and 12 to 15 to 18 rolls smothered in that delicious cinnamon butter, right? And just pounds them one after another. And so I say all that to say this. When John says they all ate till they were full, this is not Jesus providing a Weight Watchers calorie counting kind of supplement to them. He's not giving them just enough to get them home. He says, he goes full grandparent mode. Hey, get some seconds. Get some thirds. Some of you have grandmas like me. If you weren't sweating, you weren't full, right? You better keep eating. You are still hungry. You need more of this. I'm not taking it home. And so why does John give us that note? When they'd all had all that they wanted, then they started to pick up the leftovers. I think he gives that note to teach us. When we bring whatever we have in our hands to Jesus, he doesn't just do just enough. He's not the God who barely meets the standard. He's not the God who just helps you kind of skate through on thin ice your entire life. He is the God of increase and overflow. The God who does exceedingly and abundantly more. And if we had time, you could tell your stories of how Jesus has answered your prayers and multiplied your resources in an abundance. You could tell stories of how you came to Jesus with that broken marriage and you were saying, Lord, I don't have much, but what I have in my hands is a desire. And it's a desire to stay together. It's a desire to write a different story than's been written in my family for generations previous. And God took just that desire, and you didn't just stay together, but he multiplied it into a home of love, into a relationship built on trust, into generational difference in your kids and your grandkids, because he wasn't the God who said, all right, I'll keep you together. He's the God who said, watch what I'm going to do. When you just submit that to me, some of you came to the Lord in seasons of financial need. You said, Lord, I don't have much, but what I have, I'm going to offer back to you. And he wasn't just the Lord that helped you to keep the job or not lose the house or just barely meet the bills, but he was the God who poured out his blessings in an abundance. I was thinking this morning of some stories in Angie and I's life that I don't think it's quite yet time to tell. One day when I'm Pastor Mike's age and Christian Chapel's in another building project, I hope I get to come back. And I want to tell him some stories about what God did in our family through that 2010 building project. I want to tell him some stories about things God did in our marriage when we were first married and how it just grew. And some of the reason I can't tell you that is some of those stories are still being written. The multiplication is still happening. But you know it, you've experienced it when you just bring whatever you have. Some of you were in the middle of addiction and you came to the Lord and you said, I don't have much, but I have a desire to be free. And Lord, I'll do whatever you say and I'll go wherever you say. And God not only broke the chains off that addiction, but he brought you into a brand new life that's wildly different than anything you could have ever imagined. Because when he provides in abundance. Not just for you, but for those around you as well. And then sometimes there's this fear of, well, if I give the Lord what I have in my hands, am I going to leave with nothing? And John tells us in this story that once everybody is finally full, Jesus tells the disciples, now go pick up the leftovers. And says there are 12 baskets that are full, reminding us that when we offer God what we have in our hands, he takes it, he multiplies it, but he does not leave us empty-handed. And so, that it seems intentional that there are 12 baskets and there are 12 disciples. That each of them go home that day with a reminder. It does make you think, though, about the boy. Like he came with his 5 loaves and 2 fish. Do they give him anything to take home? Right? Do the 11 look at Judas and they're like, you're not going to need that. Let's give this to him. Right? Let him take it home. Just trust us, Judas. I don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but all we know is there are 12 signs of God's miraculous provision. 12 signs of God's abundance. 12 reminders that when we bring whatever we have, God doesn't just take for us and provides for others, but he actually returns to us as well. And so it brings us into this position of trust, of just understanding, sometimes I read this story and I might identify with Philip. And I might think, man, I've got to stop trying to be the problem solver all the time. I've got to stop trying to fix everything on my own. I need to learn to just, when Jesus asks me a question, I need to learn to say, Lord, you alone know. Others of us, we think, sometimes I read that story and I really identify with Andrew. I don't know what's going on, but I think I might have found something. Sometimes we identify with the crowd of, I'm just here to see something awesome, and I hope I get to participate in it. But as I've read that story over the years, the person I find myself identifying with more and more, actually the older I get, is the boy. It seems like in so many seasons, you feel like you're just standing there and you're looking at what's in your hands and you're just thinking, it's not enough. It's not enough for the opportunities, and it's not enough for the obstacles. It's not enough for the possibilities, and it's not enough for the problems. And it can't provide for the vision, and it can't heal all of the wrongs that have been done. And yet you're also just kind of looking and saying, but it's something. And I remember who I'm standing in front of. And you just offer it back to him. And again, and again, and again, Jesus multiplies. And we get to participate in his miracle working power. Rachel Wimpy is an artist that attends Christian Chapel. Some of you might know her. One of her pieces is called All I Have. I think we have it here for you. Get out of the way so you can see that. It's the boy with the 5 loaves and 2 fish. Now, if you know me, art museums probably aren't where I go on vacation. No one ever accused me of being an art critic or aficionado. And yet, in the same way that sometimes you hear a particular song and you don't like it with your mind, but you love it with your soul. Sometimes you see a piece of art and you don't appreciate it with your eyes, but it resonates with your soul. And I saw this one a year or 2 ago. Rachel showed it to me. And I was just completely captivated by it. Because what I love about it is it's the perspective of Jesus looking at the boy. The crowd, everyone else is in the background. And it's the boy just looking at what he has in his hands. And you can't quite tell on his face, is that a look of concern? Or is that a look of excitement? Is that a kid thinking, my mom won't be happy if I come home hungry? Or is that a kid thinking, Jesus is talking to me and I'm about to see something awesome? But I think the reason I've identified with it is it just seems like in every season of life, every season of growth, every season of opportunity, God's just constantly leading us into these new places where we're having to learn the same lessons over and over again of, you know what I have to do right now? I have to trust Jesus. I have to offer him back what he's placed in my hands. I have to live all of my life with open hands before him. And for those of you who you've went through several stages of life, you know what that looks like. There are those lessons you learn when you're leaving house, you're graduating high school, you're making decisions about college or jobs or your future, and you're standing in front of him saying, Lord, it's not much, but I'll give you what I have. If you get married, there's that moment, maybe when you're standing in front of the church in the ceremony, or maybe later in your marriage, where you just start to look around, you're thinking, I don't have it in me to make this work forever, but Lord, I have a desire, and I'll just give that back to you. Some of you parents, you remember that moment in the hospital when you held your baby, or maybe when the adoption agency brought them to you, and you held them in your arms, and you looked at them, and you thought, I don't have in me what it takes to love and care and provide for you as I want to, but Lord, what I have is love and care and compassion. So Lord, I'm going to give that back to you. And for some of you, God's opened doors of opportunity in business. He's opened doors of influence in our community. He's placed callings on your life. He's given you visions for the future. And you've looked at the gap between where he's calling you and where you are. And this is who you feel like this morning. But see, the lesson of Jesus feeding the 5,000 is no matter how much we have in our hands, it's never enough for the needs of the world. It always requires multiplication. It always requires surrender and submission to him. And so when Rachel showed me this piece, we ordered a print that we put down in our conference room here at Christian Chapel. It's where we do all of our staff meetings, where we do all of our board meetings. And for me, it's kind of a personal reminder of in every decision we make, in every season we're in, we're just standing there like a boy with 5 loaves and 2 fish saying, Jesus, we don't know what you're going to do, but we think it's going to be awesome. We put another copy in our missionary in residence house across the street. As we're sending men and women out to some of the darkest and most dangerous places in the world, where needs are overwhelming, where violence and persecution are very real threats, they go knowing exactly who they are. They're just men and women with 5 loaves and 2 fish standing before Jesus saying, it's not enough, but we'll give you what we have. And what we see again and again and again is when we come to a position of surrender, Jesus begins to answer the questions on the test that he sent to us. He multiplies our resources. He does amazing works of grace and mercy and provision, of healing and comfort and direction. And if we had time, I could spend hours telling you stories of all the things that God has multiplied in my life and in Angie's life. You could tell the same stories over and over and over again. We can do it in our home groups tonight. We should be doing that when we interact with each other. God has done exceedingly and abundantly more. But it starts with us just standing in front of him saying, Lord, I don't know how, but I know you. And so I'm just going to submit it and surrender it to you and let you do what you've already designed to do. Will you stand with me so we can pray together this morning? Jesus, we come to you today. We are so grateful for the scriptures. So thankful, Lord, that they are not just stories of what you've done, but they're accounts of what you still do. Today, Lord, we believe that you are still a miracle-working God. We believe that you are still the one who comes and not only enables us to pass the test, but teaches us all the way through it. You teach us about your love and your grace and your mercy and your power and your provision. Lord, this morning you see both the problems and possibilities that we face. You see the challenges that we're encountering. You see the vision you've given us that's beyond our ability to fulfill. And in all of those spaces today, Lord, we're coming just to offer you what you have placed in our hands. We're giving you our willingness. We're giving you our desire. We're giving you our love. We're giving you our new life. We're giving you our resources. We're giving you our energy. We're giving you our talent. We're giving you everything, Lord. Saying, will you take this and use it to accomplish your purposes and to fulfill your plans? And we believe as you do, Lord, that you will release gifts of grace and mercy, gifts of provision and direction, gifts of healing and comfort. We believe that you will restore relationships, that you will renew minds, that you will break the chains of addiction. We believe, Lord, that you will bring joy, that you will take back what the enemy has stolen from us. Jesus, we believe as we offer what we have to you, you will multiply it in an abundance of grace and mercy and peace and hope and joy. And so, Lord, today we lay every problem in front of you. We lay every good thing in front of you. And we say in those spaces, Lord, will you take all that we have and we'll use it to accomplish your plans to us and through us. In your name we pray. Amen. Thanks for joining us today at Christian Chapel Online. If you'd like to learn more about us, you can visit christianchapel.com. If there's something that we can pray with you about, please visit christianchapel.com/prayer. If you'd like to partner with us to tell more people the good news of Jesus, you can do that at christianchapel.com/give. If you're in the Tulsa area, again, we want to invite you to join us in person to experience the fullness of life in Christian community. And if you're outside the area, I can't encourage you enough to find a local group of believers where you can worship and serve together. God bless you. I hope you have a great week.